This one is a mouthful, so I'm going to read it. The secret struggles here are dealing with different seasons, such as sex drive, illness, grief, children, job changes, and retirement.
Okay.
So I'm going to leave it right here so
And
we can
we'll probably add some stuff to that. So really, it's dealing with different seasons. But there's a lot here. So we got to make sure we keep this particular video under 4 hours.
Right. It could be 4 hours because there's a lot of seasons in your relationships.
Yeah.
And even with sex drive, you might have a really high sex drive. Your spouse might have a low sex drive, and you've got to find the balance that's going to work for both of you. You know, a woman who had a high sex drive and then has a baby, and now she's up in the middle of the night 2, maybe 3 times. Some babies sleep well at night. Other ones could be colicky, and they can really drain you. You've been through a lot of physical changes. You're nursing. You're up with the baby. Sometimes you are just physically exhausted. And how do you think couples should deal with that? We're not going to be going through that because we have no little babies.
Yes.
But I do know that's a struggle because the man, he didn't go through all those physical changes.
Yeah.
He's still just who he is.
Yeah, right.
And now she's exhausted and her body's been stretched every which way.
Yeah.
And now they have this little baby to look after.
You know, it's funny. I read somewhere that especially after the beginning phase of a relationship, that most of the time people's sex drives won't match. It'll be off.
Right, that's true.
And it's like that for different reasons. Now let's talk about that. The seasons, reasons, and seasons. I'm a poet. You mentioned the wife having a baby. Let's talk about the wife or the husband. Look, we're just talking traditionally wife or husband, but that roles can be interchangeable. Let's say one of them get a promotion at the job and it's a lot more pressure.
Right.
A lot of couples don't engage in sex anymore because they're just flat out tired. You know, and before they had all the pressure, you know, it was anytime, all the time. Then more pressure came. Let's say one of them is dealing with a parent who's ill. Whatever kind of crisis, another person is dealing with going through menopause. Another person is guy's losing his hair and he's going bald. Now he thinks he's getting old. Really, all those things. You know,
I know.
And even for a man, let me tell you as a man, if I feel, and again, it can be kind of stereotypical, but if it's not you, please don't be offended. But just understand, as a man, if a man feels that he's not respected by his wife, he may not feel sexual to her anymore. Well, for a period of season. Mm-hmm. So if there are conflicts that are not being able to work through, then neither one of them may feel sexual. If the woman or the man feels that the other one is not helping to keep up with keeping, the house clean, or there are some people that their gift is acts of service. And when they see their spouse washing the dishes, that's a major turn on for them.
Right, right.
But maybe they don't want to help wash the dishes. They say, well, I'm tired too.
So they feel disrespected.
And then the sex goes out the window. Mm-hmm. And the problem with that is that if the sex with each other goes outside of the window, that doesn't mean that they don't want sex. Mm-hmm. And that's where it can be a dangerous situation because, especially for us as Christians, that's where the enemy comes in and becomes the accuser of the brethren, and you start accusing one another. You have misperceptions. The biggest problem sometimes in relationships is not just communication, but it's perception. Mm-hmm. The perception is, she doesn't respect me. The perception is, how she talk to me like that? Perception is, I can't believe she said that about, my job or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. These are what we call the little foxes that spoil the vine. There's a scripture in the Bible that says that. Mm-hmm.
Another thing is...
So in those seasons when we're going through those changes of life, the intimacy can be greatly affected. And some of those things are hard to talk about. If you were not in a family that talked about things, I didn't grow up in a family that talked about sex. We didn't talk about money. We didn't talk about any of those things. So even for us to go, for me personally, look, we're being honest in these things. For me to even go to where we are to talk about these things even now, openly as we're doing now. I mean, we don't put all your business out there, but to go talk about this, it's a stretch. But I think that it's important because, you know, I've learned so much being in a good relationship, in a healthy relationship. I've learned so much. I feel it would be a disservice to not be able to help others who maybe think that there's something wrong with them, when really sometimes relationships just need a little bit of information that'll help them to make better decisions.
So even with grief, and with grief, like if one of you are grieving and your heart is in so much pain, and that's where your focus is, because again, there are stages to grief. It's very difficult maybe for someone to enjoy sex and be intimate when their heart is so broken and in so much pain. For other people, sex might be healing. It might feel very much like healing. It just depends how you grieve. And with your spouse, you've got to understand everyone grieves different. Everyone handles job changes different. Every baby born is different. So some women could sail through the birth of a baby and have no complications, and maybe the baby's so quiet and well behaved. And so you've got to understand that every marriage has different things to deal with, even in these areas. So you can't compare either, you know.
And it may sound, and I know that some of this sounds complicated, but it really isn't. It's like walking and breathing at the same time. We've walked and you've been breathing for so long, it seems simple. But the mechanics of it is probably quite complex. So it sounds like the mechanics of it, but the only mechanics that you have to remember is, what does it take to please this woman? Now, the seasons may change. What it took 5 years ago may be different 5 years later, but that's okay because we're all different.
Well, we talked even when we were first married, like what would happen if one of us was paralyzed. And we talked about different ways we could keep our connection and still be intimate. And we discussed those things because it's very important to still be able to please your spouse and try to meet each other's needs the best way you can. It might not be the way everyone else is doing things, but there's ways to fulfill each other's emotional love tank.
Yeah, and they're physical because there are people who I know of. I don't know them personally, and I don't know every detail of the relationship, but I know of people who married someone who was a quadriplegic.
Right.
They were in a wheelchair. They had no feeling from the neck down, but they found a way to still have a physical relationship. Again, it may not be traditional, as you say, but you know, sometimes a lot of what makes things exciting is mental. It's not just the physical aspect of it. So in the different seasons, as seasons change, my encouragement was to make sure that you stay mentally and emotionally connected.
Right.
And if you're able to physically, you know, physical will follow behind it. But if you're connected emotionally and mentally, physical will find it. If you lead with the physical and the physical stops working, then that becomes problematic.
And to give understanding, because even through seasons of having a baby, you have to give each other understanding. Like, you have to give your wife understanding. There's a period of time you can't even be intimate for a few weeks. You can't. The doctor says no sex for several weeks. So you've got to have understanding with those things, and you've got to find ways to still show you care and still stay connected without becoming bitter. Or maybe the guy has a job change and he's got to give a lot more of his time to the job change, and he doesn't have the same time for you. You've got to give understanding too, realizing a lot of these things are not forever. They're seasons. There's seasons through grief. There's seasons through having children. There's seasons of job changes. There's all these seasons, so they're not forever, but sometimes I think it gets locked in our mind, this is the way it's going to be the rest of our lives, and it's not. So that's again where you have patience and give understanding and you give validation. And if one is weak, that's where you become strong.
Right.
when this one's weak, you become strong
Right.
for each other, and you're a support system for your spouse.
And as one is validating, it's also important for the other one to start thinking about what they want. So for instance, I was looking at this, dealing with different seasons. So we talked about some sexual things. But let's say one person retires. Now you've had a job that was so fulfilling to you, and it's retirement season. You're retired. You might go into a little bit of depression because you don't feel as valued. You don't feel a job. You know, what do I do with my life going forward? You know, and I think that to deal with that season, you may still be having great physical relations, but you're still depressed. Well, do you need to go on a road trip? Do you need to go on a vacation? Do you need to now take time and study how to study gourmet cooking? Do you need to, with all these different seasons, it's going to end up saying, what do I do next? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest thing. You're going to say, what do I do next? Now, as a Christian, I do believe that God will lead us and guide us, but at the same time, you have to seek the Lord. You got to, which means that in the process of seeking, you might not know exactly what to do next. And I don't want to talk a lot about this now, but you can become overwhelmed. You can become depressed. You can become all these kind of things, but you got to break through that. You got to fight through that. I went through a season of absolute overwhelm. Not wanting to be on the road as much anymore. I want to be closer to the kids and grandkids. And I'm still in that season. I'm not where I was a couple of years ago, but even it's interesting, this is a perfect example, even doing these videos, I realized that, people have known me as a singer. They knew you running a mission organization. We're in a new season now. Mm-hmm. And this season is to take what we have learned and to hopefully be able to help others to move forward. Where is this going to lead? I always have dreams and visions, but I don't know where it's going to lead. But I feel a sense of fulfillment to be able to sit here with you, to sit here with my wife, and to be able to talk about some of these things that are, very private, but a sense of fulfillment that maybe this can help someone else. Mm-hmm. So the season, not saying that she'll never be involved in missions and I'll never sing again, but to be honest with you, I have a greater desire to be able to do what we're doing right now, to be able to help people move forward than I did in singing. But during the singing season, that was everything. Mm-hmm. That was number one, numero uno. I thought I'd never stop singing. And I still will sing, and you'll still have a compassionate heart for other people, which you do. You work with people now, and you're one of the most compassionate people I've ever met. But for us to do this now, it's funny, when we first got married, someone asked us to do a marriage conference with them. I think we had been married 6 months, something like that. 5 months? Not even?
6 weeks.
Now, we had both been married before, and we had both been in long-term marriages. So I can tell you about the things that shouldn't do.
That don't work.
Yeah, that don't work. But I didn't know how to tell people what should work. I didn't have the words, the phraseology. And to think, here we are now, these few years later, after going through our own growing and after taking formal study, I feel, we can make videos forever. There's so much I want to talk about, and we're going to be sharing a lot more stuff.
And there's so much hidden pain and so many secret struggles that couples have. And I think hopefully if we can be a little bit transparent about a few things, mm-hmm. even if it helped one couple, mm-hmm. that would be very rewarding.
Yeah.
If it saved one marriage, how rewarding would that be?
Absolutely. So as we walk through our season, we're not telling you to do something that we're not doing either. You walk through your season, don't let anyone or anything tell you what you can or cannot mm-hmm. do. Mm-hmm. There will be some things you'll do together that'll, be a financial blessing. There are things that you do together that may not be, but I think that whatever you do, we used to sing a song when I was a kid, only what you do for Christ will last. And I think that when you keep that as the forefront of your mm-hmm. head and your heart and desire to give mm-hmm. of what God has given to you. The Bible says he gives seed to the sower. And if you're not sowing anything into people's lives, why should God give you more seed, more good experiences, more blessings, more breakthroughs? We've had some pretty good breakthroughs that we've seen God do, and we're so grateful for that. And I'd like to think that it's hopefully we've been faithful to share out of the abundance of our experience, of what God has done and what God has taught us. And maybe now we can share it with other people, and it can be a blessing to them too. We would love to see relationships restored. None of us are perfect, but we would just love to see relationships restored and people moving forward and moving ahead in their life and not stuck in the same thing year after year after year after year after year. What's the sense of being married and not enjoy the relationship? What's the sense of even serving God and not enjoying the relationship? So anyway,
so
that's the
just
seasons.
understand there are seasons and they come and go, and every season has an expiry date. So try to glean the good and enjoy the moments that are good in that season, and have understanding and compassion for whatever your spouse is going through, and just keep moving forward.
That is correct.